to speak slowly.
In following few minutes, the goal is to introduce you the program itself and our lecturers who are going to provide you the knowledge and information following 3 days. The program itself, it's been supported by the Norwegian grants. We asked for the financial support under the called CZ07 scholarship program. The project applicant is the Environmental Center of the Charles University, and the project partner is the Norwegian University College for Agriculture and Rural Development. The overall grant, which we asked for, was 1 million crowns. Now I would like to tell you something about the Environmental Center. It is not a faculty, it's a department. It was being founded by Charles University in 1992. We consist of 3 units. We specialize on development indicators, environmental economics, and education and international and information for sustainable development. Our activities mainly consist of creating innovative courses and learning opportunities, such as our course you're participating in. Then we undertake some research in several areas, but mainly in environmental issues, and we provide expertise for wide public. And you can see other areas of specialization which you can find on Environmental Center. And now HLB. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to describe HLB. Anyway, then I will ask Mr. Evans to tell you a little bit more. Nevertheless, the inovace, it is the academic institution which is focusing on producing knowledge for rural development. It is cooperatively owned by over 120 rural institutions, right?
Farmers union, local governments. It's a co-operative university.
And the university goal is to produce knowledge for vital rural communities.
And can I just say, not
yes.
knowledge about vital rural communities, but knowledge for the community. So we're not a university who sits in our office behind our door.
And of course, I would like to tell you something about the location we are at just right now. As you know, the castle is located in South Bohemia. Then it was founded in the 13th century. It's been included in the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage since 1992, and of course it ranks among the most important European heritage sites in all Europe. Czech team, it's us. So let me introduce you Mr. Rhys. It is the head of the Environmental Education Department.
Good morning.
Then Mrs. Jana Dlouhá, the researcher of Environmental Center. Me, I'm the external worker, let's say, of Environmental Center, and Mr. Pavel Slavko, who is the head of the castle. And now Norwegian team. Norwegian team consists of Mr. Rhys Evans.
Me and my friends.
What was the reasoning behind this project? As you know, rural communities in Czech are constantly seeking economic opportunities which would improve their situation, which would provide them the sustainability issues. However, there are some obstacles which prevent rural entrepreneurs as well as local governments to do so. It is mainly the lack of information and low motivation. So we are hoping that this course will provide you the knowledge and the motivation to actually improve the current situation of rural communities in Czech. Results and outputs. So far, we have strong bonds between the HLB and the Environmental Center. We constantly exchange knowledge and information, in particular in the topic of rural development. We create other mutual projects using expertise and knowledge in the field, and we are looking for effective intervention towards improving the economy of rural areas. The result of our cooperation so far is this project. This project is designed for 1 year. Within the year, we're supposed to deliver this seminar 2 times. One time is now, where Mr. Evans will be the leader. The second time will be in September, where Czech lecturers will be filter. Similar format, and maybe I will ask Mr. Evans to talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. Yes. I see why. That's because I wrote this. We combined. I thought I was going to give the introduction. She thought she was going to give the introduction. So we've combined. First of all, this course is something that we have been doing in Norway with rural communities, project managers, local government people who support projects. And it's called Samfunnsentreprenørskap, which means innovative rural community, although it's actually easier to say in Norwegian. There are very few things that are easier to say in Norwegian than in English, but Samfunnsentreprenørskap, yes.
Seriously?
But, so the idea here is to bring people who already have some either experience or desire to do something themselves. So, if this is you, you already are beginning to be experts yourselves. So it's not like we are the experts and you guys are the empty glass that we pour the knowledge in. You know? And so this course, it's very important that you ask questions, that you think about your own experience, your own desires, your dreams. And that's why it's going to be 3 intensive days. This course is not going to be like watching television. We are going to say, oh, what do you think? You know, what do you think? Like this. Because that's where the most learning happens, when we have an environment like that. So we will have lectures and presentations, discussions between us all. It says here student discussion, but in fact it should say expert discussion. Yes? You will have an assignment which won't be very big and will be done in Czech, not English, of course. And the idea is we'll get you to go into small groups, 3 people, 4 people, to come up with a project idea and then write out how you would make the project happen, almost as if you were applying to us for money. And we will give you feedback as if you were applying to us for money. Because of course, if you're going to do a project, you eventually have to do this. And that shouldn't be the first time, you know, when you're actually going to the government and saying, oh please, can we have $1 million Czech krona? And they, so that's what the assignment is about. It's not to give you an A or a B or a C or 80% or a 60%. It's to say, oh, this looks realistic. I would fund this. But have you thought about the community? I don't see the community yet. So that's what the assignment will be. And Lucy will talk about this more. We also are creating a Moodle online page for this course. Again, we'll show you where it is, and you can, you know, it's right down. And the idea is that will become your personal library for this course. So what you then do is we will put all of our presentations in there, so you have a record of them, you can look at them again. Some readings and resource materials. We might even work to get some important, a list of important website links. So this is a resource, this Moodle is a resource that you can take away from this course and use in 6 months. As long as you remember to download everything you keep it. Yes? When we do this course, 2 years later, I'll get an email, oh, do you still have your... It's like, yeah, exactly, that's the same thing I asked you to download 2 years ago. So this is your resource, use it. Yeah?
Next, key message.
Key message, yes. Now, very sadly, I was trying to pull up a YouTube video to show you the key message, but we can't get the sound into these television screens right now, so I won't do it. But the idea is, you, we can be rural innovators. This is not rocket science. Yeah? I teach this, I've been teaching this stuff, I've been helping communities realize their dream since 1999 in Scotland, and then in 2010 in Norway. And I've seen it again and again and again success. All you need is the motivation and the tools. And this, and some practice using them. So you can be a rural innovator, you can be an entrepreneur, you and your neighbors and your community can be successful. That's really what this course is about. You do not have to be PricewaterhouseCoopers or IBM in order to do this. And especially because one of the things, in the title of the course, it says Innovative Community Enterprise. It means you don't have to do it all by yourself. You can be successful with your neighbors. You can be successful with your community. And some of the tools that we will talk about here for you is how to work with your community. How to even identify, do you have a community for this? So the idea is that it's simple, really. You will see, I will be talking this morning, or this afternoon actually, about the personal journey of being an entrepreneur, of being an innovator, which is of course a very scary thing. And we'll have a whole lecture about this, because if you want to do something that's never been done before, most of the people you talk to will say you're crazy. I can't do that. So we will take you through how to think about that yourself, how to go, no, yes, I can. And together with your neighbors, with your community, between you all, you have all the necessary skills, all the necessary strengths, or the ability to learn them that you need. You just have to be able to think about it. And the video I was going to put up here was from a Disney children's movie called The Little Engine That Could. Now, I don't know whether this is a story that children get or not, but I grew up with it, and it's this little steam engine going up a hill, and the hill's really steep, and the load is really heavy, and he goes, I think I can, and he goes, I think I can, and then of course he gets over the hill, and it's going, I knew I could. Yes, that's what the video is, and that's, in a sense, that's the journey that you as a community will take if you want to make something new and innovative.
Okay, schedule.
Yeah.
So each lecture will have approximately 45 minutes. You have the schedule just in front of you. I hope you all have the schedule. Do you guys have your schedule? No, right? Do? Yeah. If any of you doesn't have your schedule, I have many copies. So, in terms of organization, you all know where is the restaurant where you're supposed to have your breakfast and lunch. So we will meet there at 12. And then in the evening today we have the open ceremony, which is in Marketa restaurant. Mrs. Otto, can you please describe the way how to get to Marketa?
Let's go past the bar.
No,
Afternoon I show you the way.
Okay, so we can go there together and yeah. It's not really complicated, however, sometimes the whole castle is complicated. What else? Tomorrow we will start again at 8 o'clock. You have your breakfast, you will continue with the lectures, with the lunch, and then the dinner will be again in Maslenice. the Maslenice. There is a mistake in the schedule. Sorry for that. And we will end up on Sunday the discussion. We will conclude with the discussion, which is set up at 4 o'clock, and it will be end of the course. And you will get the certificate, which is issued by the HLB and Charles University. Now some IT. The Moodle is set up and on this address, and Kirka will tell you something more about how to sign in and get a password.
Okay, you have the address, and if you go on the address, if you see it,
Can you?
if not, maybe you can, I don't know.
Can you demonstrate?
Yeah, you can demonstrate.
Yeah. And you have to go there and say sign, přihlásit se a začněte nyní vytvoření nové účtu, jo? A tam napíšete pár údajů a tím se tam přihlásíte a vás potom zařadit do toho kurzu. Asi jste dost lidi s Moodlem dělali, ale protože to v podstatě, já budu chvíli česky, protože možná jsme to dělali složitější, tak vlastně tam budou uloženy ty materiály a tak, takže to není nic složitého, se to prostě normálně odkazuje. So this is about Moodle. Well, Wi-Fi, if you want to use Wi-Fi, the network is called Wi-Fi, and the password is internet with capital I and capital T.
Like this?
Yeah, yeah. And there is also a web page of the project. It's not very complicated, it's not very much things there, but www.ponpe. Okay. So this is the web of our project, and we will put there also the link to the Moodle. It's not there at this moment, but it will be there. So
That's almost it. There will be some food provided to you during the seminar. It will be in this room, which is just behind this door. The toilet is around the corner. If you have any problems with language or you don't understand anything, just do not hesitate to ask us. We will be more than happy to assist you with any inquiries. And I guess we can start with the lecture.
Yes.
Okay.
in principle, there is no problem if you speak together Czech. Only Rhys does not understand still Czech, he has to learn still. But all the others speak Czech. So
But I can guess sometimes.
Yeah.
That's so
So yeah,
Be
I don't see
careful
what
about
happens.
Okay, so thank you and enjoy.
Yes.
Ještě možná z těch organizačních věcí, jestli dovolíte skutečně, abyste byli zmatení nejbližší orientací tady v areálu. Takže prosím vás, toto místo je na druhém zámeckém nádvoří. Je 5 zámeckých nádvoří, každé je označené cedulkou. Budova mincovny zde, kde se vidíte v přízemí, je druhé zámecké nádvoří. Má silnice, objekt na zpracování máselných produktů ze 16. století, typické z grafito, v rohu protějším je vaše snídaně a oběd, ano, a nepletejte si to, markéta je zase nahoře, až za 5. nádvoří u zámecké zahrady, tam se vypravíme společně. No. A nedejte se, opakuju, když bude problém hovořit česky, ať nám pan nerozumí, to bude velmi dobrý. Že vedle potom bude občerstvení, on k tomu teď nerozumí, takže vám nevypije kafe, všechno voda. Jo? A jinak vás tady srdečně vítám. Přeji hezký den tady. So, now for you.
Yes, no. Okay. Language. I live in Norway. I've only lived there 4 years. Jeg snakker norsk, ja, men og jeg forstår det også, men I lecture in English, and my students question me in Norwegian. Now, I would love to be able to say to you, we can do the same here, but if you question me in Czech, then that's okay. But then I need help from the rest of the team to translate. But you can do that. This is important that you be comfortable. And you be sure that you know, you're happy that you know what I'm talking about. This is why I use the presentations, so you can see the words, what is innovation, as well as me say it. Yes. And I will try and speak slowly. However, if you don't understand anything, right away, stick your hand up. Catch my attention. Because if you don't understand it, like he says to me, I will say to you, can you help him? And between us all, we will figure it out. I have done this many times now, and I'm very confident that will happen. Yes? So, if I don't understand you, I will ask you. So if you don't understand me, ask me. This part of the course, we've called it, What is Innovation? Now, innovation is actually is a word that has many different meanings. And certainly if I'm the biggest bank in the Czech Republic, innovation means something very different to me than it would if I'm a farmer in South Bohemia. So it's very important, I think, to talk about what exactly we mean with this. And in fact, what do we mean when we say innovative, rural, community enterprise? Because in this case, every word is important to the idea of what we do. If you look around where you are, I mean, you are here because you want something new, something different, something that is not already happening in your life, in your community. And in that case, what you're going to do is going to be innovation. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's ever done it before, but not for you, not in your community, not here. So, when we say innovation, we do not mean to make something up. To stare at a screen that's empty and go, oh, what do I do? What's new, what's innovative? Oh no, somebody's already done that. Can't do that. No. And you can see here from these definitions, these traditional definitions of innovation. This is from a dictionary. Something original and more effective, and, because of that, new, that breaks into the market or society. I mean, this word innovation is used by businesses and economists a lot. And it becomes almost, if this was the Middle Ages, if this was the 14th century, that would be on our coat of arms. Innovative, yeah, thank you. And that's the way a lot of people, like if you go to a university course and you take an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration, that's what they're talking about. Breaking into the market. All those things. Business Dictionary. The process of translating an idea. In other words, taking an idea and changing it into a good or a service. A good is something material, something you can kick your toe on. A service is immaterial. Here, can I help you? Oh, sorry, you can't stand up. That's a service, yeah? A good or a service that creates value for which customers will pay. And this is really important because sometimes your customer as a community enterprise will be the government. But sometimes it will be ordinary people who will pay. When Mr. Slavko has tourists come to this castle, they pay. But this is a government-owned, a people's-owned institution. So those two things, government, they're not two separate things, the private economy, the public economy. For communities, they mix. And that's really a lot about what this course is about. And this is an important thing to think about as well. Innovation is not the same as invention. And I will show you in several of these lectures why that's the case. You don't have to invent something. And I'll show you how that works a bit later. So this is why I say you don't have to be Einstein. It's not rocket science. It's actually seeing opportunities that are being missed where you live. Peter F. Drucker is an American futurologist. And he has a pretty good set of things that lead to innovation, different changes in industry structure. Before, I was 39 years old when I went to university for the first time, which is why I'm a junior researcher with a gray beard. And before that, I was a truck driver in Canada and in America for 20 years. And I drove all over North America. Big trucks. Have any of you seen the Ice Road Trucking television show? I've done Ice Road Trucking in Canada. It is nothing like the TV show. It's one of the most boring truck driving jobs I have ever had. You can never go faster than 20 miles an hour. And you're driving on a lake for 3 hours. It was really boring. But the point is, when I got out of high school, I didn't want to go to university. I said, I've had babysitting for 12 years. I don't want any more babysitting. I want to do something real. What can I do where I can earn money and I don't have to have an apprenticeship, to become an electrician for 7 years? What can I do that's quick? Trucking was the answer. And so from 1970 until 1986, I drove trucks for big trucking companies. And the companies owned the trucks. I was a union member, a Teamster. I got paid good money. And then there was a crisis in the early 1980s, what they called the recession. And it was really bad. Where I am from, Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada, 100,000 jobs disappeared in 1 year because it's all forest industry and nobody was building houses. Interest rates were 22%. All of the companies had lots of wood because they didn't have anything to do with it. It was a very bad time. My house, my family house, in which I raised my kid, we had 48% negative equity, which means we bought it for $82,000 and it was worth $46,000 in 1986. Big crisis. What was the response? Truck drivers now buy their own trucks. Oh, we'll sell you the truck really inexpensive, which you can keep for 3 years, and then you have to buy a new one at full price. And I figured, if you can make money owning trucks, the companies would own the trucks, wouldn't they? The very fact that they don't want the trucks tells me that this is dangerous for them to buy them. Because they can buy them cheaper than me, because they buy 20, 30 at a time. They can fix them cheaper than me. They can buy the fuel cheaper than me, because I'm only one. The whole industry restructured in innovation was transportation companies now don't own anything except for data. During the 1980s, I worked for the company that is now called DHL. First driving the big trucks. Yeah? Oh, we should talk. And then as a sales rep and in management. DHL does not own its trucks. It does not own its airplanes. It does not own its warehouses. It does not own its roller systems for the freight. The only thing it owns is the data about its customers and its operations. The industry completely restructured, and that in transportation is innovation. That's what I mean by changes in industry structure. When I was young, I expected for my whole life to be driving trucks, working for big companies, driving company trucks. When I was at university, I drove a tank truck for Esso in Vancouver, delivering petrol to the stations. That was one of the last company jobs around, and I couldn't get over how nice the trucks were. But it's changed. Industry is always changing. And for us in rural places, that creates opportunities. Chances to start businesses that deliver things. I mean, think about, I'll come back to this. The market structure changes as well. Who buys things? Who's paying for it? What are people willing to pay? You know, when I was a truck driver, the thought of taking a membership in a gym and exercising and paying for it, yeah, right. You know, that's for people who've got more money than brains. You know, I work for a living. I don't need to, you know. But society has changed and the market has changed and people now pay for those things. So as a rural community, if you can, for example, deliver great opportunities at outdoor recreation, at exercise outside, people will now pay for that, where they wouldn't really pay for it before. And we'll talk about that some more. Does this make sense? Are you understanding me? Are you following me with this? Yeah? Oh, because if not, say, okay? Local and global. I was talking to a good friend of mine in Vancouver on the phone a couple of days ago. He's married a woman and she has 2 children during their teenage years. And she went away for a month. This is new. So he was alone with the 2 kids for 1 month. First time. I can't get the boy off of the phone. He's always on the phone. He drives me crazy. You know, I'm talking to him and he's like this. You know, when my daughter was 15, there was no mobile phones. We survived quite well, actually. I would give her a quarter and say, if you get in trouble, phone me. Like that. Our ability to reach out and touch the rest of the world. I was born in England in 1953, sorry. And in 1955, we moved to Canada when I was a baby. My father saw his mother once again in 1963, and once again in 1974, and then she died. Because for people like us, flying across the Atlantic was not a possibility. Now, my daughter lives in San Diego. She has 2 children, and we Skype every 2 weeks. Those kids, when they were 8 months old, Papa. Our ability to touch people outside of our community has changed enormously. And this, for community enterprises, is an enormous opportunity. Right. So, innovation does not necessarily mean inventing something that's never been seen before. Although that's good too. And I'll tell you some stories about that later today. As they say, I also am a musician. There's no such thing as a new blues song. You just take bits of old blues songs and put them together in a new way. You know, C16, you know? It's like, he's not doing anything different than somebody was doing 90 years ago. Except for he's a white guy, he has a guitar with only 3 strings, you know, and he writes these songs that sound just like they were written 90 years ago. But that's innovative because nobody else is doing it on the music. That's innovation. It's taking existing things, putting them together in a new way that fits the times, the market, the opportunities. So it's all about combining, and I will talk tomorrow, or just tomorrow, about the way in which computers and internet technology enable exactly this kind of thing. I mean, for example, I have a student in Norway who has a rural food and health business. And she actually gives away the knowledge of how to make the food. But people come to her anyway because she's given them this. So she puts it on the internet. But people still come and pay her to have 4-day health retreats at her farm. Because they're part of her community now. They feel like they know her because of her website. So, you know, our ability to do this, to take existing things and combine them in new ways, it's what digital technologies are about. So, for example, if you live in a rural community and the government has stopped providing care for old people in your community, so if the old people, for example, I worked on a project in Scotland. The old people who've lived in this community all their life, you know, they have these big family houses that are falling apart because they're too old even to cut the grass, never mind to hammer and fix and build and paint and all that stuff. But they stay in their house because if they were to go for elderly care, they would have to move to the nearest city to do it, because that's where the government provides care for old people. They don't provide care for old people in the rural place where they've lived all their lives. So I worked with a community in 2002 that said, we want to build housing for our old people because the government's not doing it anymore. That was innovative. And you can see how it delivers important good things by keeping the elderly in the community, by keeping them near their children, near their neighbors that they've known all their lives. Their quality of life is much improved instead of moving into some room in some building in a city with 250,000 people, none of whom they know. That's innovative. Okay. Innovation, yeah? That's the start. Maybe at the end on Sunday I'll say to you, so, what do you think is innovation? Because hopefully, as we go through this journey, you will have more thoughts about it. Now, another important thing we have to think about here is community. What is community? Now, there's a great American saying, and it says, who are you calling a honky, white boy? In other words, I'm not in your community. Because honkies are white, right? Honkies are redneck, white, hillbilly guys who hate blacks and lesbians and feminists and yeah? Who are you calling a honky, white boy? Who is community? We think we know. We have kind of a general idea that we've learned over our life. But really, I like to say there is no such thing as community. That is the word singular. What there is communities, many. So if I live in Krumlov, I will be part of multiple communities. There's a rally, right? Like a car rally this weekend in Krumlov. I might be part of the car racer community. And I also might be part of a community in my church. And I might be part of a community where my kids become friends with other people's kids, and suddenly we all become a community. There are many communities, and it's important when you're thinking about rural community development that you look at that idea of community and you kind of open it up a little bit, because there are opportunities. There are, in fact, two ways that we think about community. The first is geographical. We all live in Toronto. We're all part of that community. It's probably the weakest definition of community that there is, because me and my neighbors are always fighting. Are we in the same community? Well, yes and no. But increasingly, at the end of the 20th century, and then now in the 21st century, we have what we call affective communities. In English, the word affect means emotion, feeling. So I'm a car rally driver because I love driving fast. I'm part of an affective community. Now, some of them might come from Prague, some of them might come from another country, some of them might come from right here, but we are all part of a community, people who come together and do something. Now, here is where the opportunity comes. You remember what I said about these kind of changes. Suddenly, you can make a community for people who don't live right here. You can make a community of vegans who are really into slow food. That's a market, yes? If you have the tools to turn that community into a market, if you can communicate, if you can figure out what they want and what they're willing to spend money on, and you have it, you let them know you have it, suddenly you have a community, an affective community. They don't all live in the same place, but they all have an investment in something. And in fact, modern sociologists now, they talk about life now. We are members of multiple communities, each one of us. I might be a banker at my job, but on the weekends I'm one of these medieval reenactment societies, and I dress up like a knight and I go out with 2,000 other people and we all kind of horse around. And I may be gay, so I'm part of a gay community. Or I may be a parent and I'm part of my children's community. We all are part of multiple communities. So if you think like that, then you can start to open up where maybe some of the opportunities might be. For example, I'll give you a personal example. In the 2000s, I was in a long-term relationship with a partner who was a horse competitor. She was English, and she did eventing, cross-country show jumping and dressage. And she had two massive 18-hand Belgian warm blood horses, like their ass was bigger than my head. And Springy could jump 2 meters, 2.4 meters. And my partner had been riding for 30 years. She was extremely good. I never rode those horses. They would have thrown me up. But this is the first time I ever was around horses, and I fell in love with the horses. My first horse. We're divorced now, and I miss the horse far much more than I miss my ex. And unfortunately, if we have a child, we can negotiate joint custody. If it's a horse, forget it. So every morning we go up at 6 in the morning to where the horse was, and she would practice and train and ride, and I would muck out the stable and deal with the other horse while the other one was being ridden. And I discovered I really liked it. I really loved it. The horses, they're amazing, you know, they're so smart. And 2,500 years ago, this Greek philosopher, what was his name, Xenophon, said, horses are already half human, and humans are already half horse. 2,500 years ago he wrote that. There's something very special, and I discovered it with these horses. So one day we were going, I don't know what we were doing. She was riding, I was walking. That happened a lot. And I thought, I'm a geographer. I'm a human geographer by training. It's amazing. All these horses, they must have an impact, you know, on the rural economy, on the landscape. It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, you know the joke about horses. How do you make a small fortune with horses? You take a large fortune and you buy horses. There's a lot of money being spent. People must have written about this. Yes? No. Look, how do you find anything? I can't believe this. So I thought, well, okay. That's interesting. So I'll start something. That was in 2009. I started something called the Equine Research Network, which is, all I did was make a website and go to some conferences where I made a session where we talked about horses. I now am the convener of the Equine Research Network, which has 150 members from 32 countries, every one of whom is a social scientist who writes about the human-horse relationship. And I get emails from people I don't know saying, Dr. Evans, we are the Journal of Sociological Research. Wondered if you'd like to referee this paper about horses. I'm a world expert on horses. All I did was create a website and make a community. It's not even, we don't have a bank account. But we made it real. And I get research grants now. I mean, I just finished a big, really cool project looking at native breed horses in tourism for rural development in Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and Norway. So for 3 years, I've just got to meet more horse people to do things that help horse people get support. This is how, you see, we created an effective community. We created and I just said, does anybody want to be part of this community? And 150 people said, yeah, I do. You remember where we started? You can do this. I mean, literally, I had to learn how to use Joomla, you know, to make a website. And it was a pretty crappy website at first, but people didn't care because they're so passionate about horses, they wanted to be a part of it. That's what I mean by community. You have to think really widely about community. You know, for example, if you're delivering like outdoor recreation to city people, they're your community, as well as your neighbors and the people that they go riding to. Now, this outdoor recreation, adventure recreation, I got my first academic research job in 1999 in Scotland. And the first thing that I did, which means the first thing I got a little bit of money to do research on, because that's how it works in universities, was on community-owned forests and the social value of forests and how forests are a resource for communities to make new businesses. And it was in the Highlands of Scotland, this community forest. And I went for 2 years, once a month, on a Friday night at 7 o'clock to their board meeting, you know, their monthly meeting of the American Forest Trust board. And the people, they were great, and some of them are still my friends. But up in that part of Scotland in 1999, there were no bed and breakfast places, and there was no hotels. So if I didn't stay at somebody's house, because you know, the meeting went until 11 o'clock at night in the north of Scotland in December. And it was a 3-hour drive from Aberdeen. And I normally had to drive home for 3 hours at 11 o'clock at night. It's okay, I'm in my truck right there. And that's, in fact, my email is called Hi Miter. That's because that was my trucking handle. Okay, a few more miles doesn't matter. Now, in that same area, based around, I went back 10 years later to do a second study to see what had happened to change the growth. There are 42 bed and breakfasts within 5 kilometers of that community forest. There is even a business in Drumnatrucket that does nothing else but book bed and breakfasts. And of course, when I said in 1990, you should open a bed and breakfast, don't be crazy. Maybe they'd come, What are you on about? Don't be crazy. There's 42 of them. Another one on the same theme, I was down in, yes?
And was that because of the community forest?
Yes,
Yeah, so people
totally.
like coming to visit.
Exactly. And the activities, see what they did is they took the forest and they made mountain biking paths and exercise paths and art in the forest, and they also do a lot of work with young people. So they have a forest school, they work with teenagers who've been referred from the courts, teenagers who are at risk of going to jail. No, you go and you work and learn how to, all of that. And they're not the only one. Now there's 4 community forests within the area. And then there's also private businesses doing the same thing. When I went to them 10 years later, they said to me, now when we think about the economy, we think much bigger. Not just the forest, but the whole of the North Shore of Loch Ness is our economy, because we see how what we have done has inspired people to do.
May I ask what you mean by community forest? It's like that they own it together and it's like a protected area, or?
Okay. Yeah. In Scotland, right now, 82 people own 62% of the land in rural Scotland. 82 people. So if you live in a community, you do not own the land that your house is on. You rent it from a lord with a 99-year lease. And these communities, Margaret Thatcher came along, nobody voted for Margaret Thatcher in Scotland. 1 MP out of 59. So she said, Scotland, forget it. They closed the schools, closed the hospitals, they stopped investing, and it got really bad. And probably 35% of people moved away. But what's so interesting is that the people who stayed because they loved it, it was their home, it was where they were born, it's so beautiful. So they realized that if we don't get off our ass and do something ourselves, nothing is ever going to happen. And one of the first things that they did, it's a political thing in Scotland, was buy their own land. So the land is owned by a trust. So nobody, people don't own the forest trust owns the forest. It's what they call a company limited by guarantee. So you might have a share, but you don't get money back. But you have a vote in the, in the board decision. So, okay, so they bought 300, and it's even worse. The only land that the Forestry Commission would sell to them, that the government would sell, was bad forest land. Of course it is. They kept the good stuff themselves. So this forestry was not for cutting down trees. It was poor forest land. But they wanted to own something because it was so politically important to them to say, no, this is our land and we are not leaving. And the new Scottish Parliament, which came in 1998, supported that. And boom, now in Scotland there's 365 community forests. And when I did it in 1999, there was 82. So, yeah, it's been like that. Anyways, what I was going to say was, in 2001, I did a project which it was called Understanding Forestry's Role in Rural Development. UFRD, Understanding Forestry in Rural Development. And I worked with economists, which is always an interesting thing to do. And they were trying to put up a formula so the government could figure out how much value there really is in forests. And one of them did input-output models, economic stuff, shadow multipliers, there was another one, and I did social value. Oh, Rhys, you can do social value. Okay. And came up with this big method, and we had the money to run, to try it out in 4 places all across the UK. So we went down to rural Wales, where there was this big forest, and you know, we did all this stuff. Part of it, and this is the Forestry Commission had just built its first downhill mountain bike trail in one of its forests in 2002. They'd spent £2 million building a big, huge, world-class. And I went to interview the man who was the boss of the Alternative Forestry Association in Wales. The, you know, who you would think would be looking for, you know, don't just cut the trees down and ship them off to Sweden to be turned into IKEA furniture, you know, to keep the value local. And I said, so, you know, I'm really surprised. There's all this mountain bike trail being built, but nobody talks about it. Are you recording this? Is it recording? Okay, I will not give you a verbatim, I will do the nice version. This is the nice version. Don't fucking talk to me about fucking mountain bikes. Our boys need real goddamn jobs, not a bunch of fucking guys running around in the goddamn forest. They need jobs in goddamn factories. This is just a fashion. In 5 years, it'll be bloody well gone. Don't talk to me about this mountain biking. And I'm like, I mean, that is the nice version. I haven't heard anybody swear like that since I was a truck driver. I'm like, talk into the microphone. You know, talk into the microphone. Now, in Scotland, last year, in Fort William, another Forestry Commission mountain bike trail, they held, and they've been doing this for a few years, but they held the Scottish version of the Kona Downhill World Mountain Biking Grand Prix Championship. And in Fort William, it brought £13 million into the local community in 2 weekends. £13 million. We don't want our bloody mountain bikes, our boys doing this. This is innovation. And this is the process of innovation. People say, don't be stupid. Who's going to ride a mountain bike up here? And I have to admit, there was a time in my life where I might have said that too, maybe 20 years ago. Outdoor adventure recreation. It's a huge opportunity for rural communities. It's one of the probably the most used models that is done. When we talk about community, it's important because it is about bottom-up development. In other words, the development comes from on the ground, not from some experts who come in from outside. Why? Because local communities have things that outsiders don't have. Local knowledge. For example, another project in Scotland, in a place called Aberfeldy, which is in Highland, Perthshire. There is a set of apocryphal stories in the Highlands of Scotland about illegal whiskey distilling. And the farmers would dig holes in the ground and put tiny little stills in the holes and to make whiskey. And in order to escape the tax that you have to pay, they would put a barrel of whiskey on a horse and lead it over these mountains, terrible mountain paths. Now these terrible mountain paths are now called whiskey smuggler trails. And in our project, we went to all the landowners and we collected all the local knowledge and stories, and we wrote it up into a story, and we gave it to all of the bed and breakfasts and the hotels, and they immediately could say, come and visit the whiskey smuggling trails and charge £10 a night more. You know, it's a brochure and it's the whiskey smuggler's trail. Where did that knowledge come from? That was, the people in Edinburgh don't like this. But they want to experience it. We were hiking on those whiskey smokers. Can you imagine being here in the winter and going, oh God, Mabel, I don't know, did you see how bad it was? You can just, it's, local knowledge is so important. And that's why bottom-up development is important, and that's why community development is such an important thing. Because you know what? You guys do know better. Local people know. Don't put your bridge there because the river floods every 10 years. Put it somewhere else. People who come in from outside don't necessarily know that kind of thing. Yeah. If a community develops something, it owns it. Maybe, you know, it's not on a piece of paper, but that's our whiskey smuggling trail. That's our community forest. You can tell, by the way, by talking to the kids. The kids will do, oh, yeah. I mean, I have a paper that I never ever published called Running Around Like They Own the Place, which was looking at the kids in this community forest. Because, you know, in Britain, especially in Scotland, you're always on somebody else's land. And, you know, 70 million people on a very small island. There's a sort of there's an element of constraint, you know? And yet, in the beginning, these kids were running around, you know, so we're going to talk to them, you know? This is our forest. And they involved the children in the planning of the trails. They involved the children in the planning of what they're going to do. With the board, they had a youth committee that was a part of it. So they owned it. They owned it. And that's really, really important for making this kind of stuff work. And I will talk about this much more on Sunday when I'm going to give you a presentation with a number of Scottish examples of this kind of thing. So, sustainable development is extremely important. How do you say sustainable development in Czech?
Udržitelný rozvoj.
Okay. In Norwegian, we call bærekraftig. Everybody's got a word for it. Sustainable development is really important. It's like a virtue. You get rewards for sustainable development. Community development sits at the heart of the sustainable development. And that's why this is important. So, rural community enterprise. What do we need? Okay, rural, we've done everything else. What about the rural? There's two kinds of rural. There's the peri-urban rural that's close to the cities. It has its own problems. You know, because the city gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and land gets more expensive, and you have to move further away or be living in the city. But at the same time, for example, if you have a small farm, across the north of Europe, horse ownership is growing 7 to 10% a year. Every year, 7 to 10% more people owning horses and riding. In Norway, Sweden, and Finland, between 78 and 80% of horse owners are women. In Norway, 48% of those women have a university education. And they work at urban jobs, and they live in the city, so they can't keep their horse in their apartment. So what do? They keep their horse on a farm within a 40-minute drive of their house. So in peri-urban rural situations, there are lots of opportunities for a small farm. We figure in Norway it's 5,000 kroner a month. That's 500 euros a month if you're feeding the horse on hay that you've grown on your farm. That's what you get. That can make the difference for a small farmer between losing money on the farm and making a little bit of money. Yeah? So there are lots of peri-urban opportunities, but there also are, of course, remote rural, places that are far away. Although, I have to say, being Canadian, and I look at Czech Republic, there is no such thing as remote rural. I remember in 1972, we elected the first time the Labour government in my province. You know, they've been right-wing all the rest of the time. And in order to celebrate, we jumped into my pickup truck and we drove 82 miles to the nearest pub. And then turned around and came home again, you know? That's remote rural, you know? But it's important to think about this because this affects the kind of enterprises you can build, the kind of markets you can take advantage of. But what's even more important is this. You cannot have a rural space if you don't have an urban space. The two are the same size of the same thing. They're not two different things. When we drove here from Prague, I'm looking at forests, forestry, farms. Where's all that stuff going? It's not being necessarily consumed there. It's being consumed in the cities. So the shape, even what's grown on the land, no matter how remote, it's the result of urban influence. So when you think about yourselves as rural people, you have to think, yeah, we're rural, but that doesn't mean that we're separate. It means we have certain things that they want. And that's, what do I have? They want. Okay, that's enterprise. And of course now, things are much closer. It is much easier to get from place to place. In my part of Norway now, it's near Stavanger in the southwest, I meet lots of adult people, old people, not like me, who remember their parents using horses on the farm. Horses are a living memory in that part of Norway. And they tell me stories. We used to ride the horse in Stavanger to go shopping once a month. It took all day. It takes 35 minutes in a car. The world has changed, and that makes it really much, much easier for you to deliver something to an urban market. So, rural community enterprise, we'll talk about this a whole lot more, so I won't spend a lot of time, but it involves private businesses. Don't think because the word community is there that it doesn't mean that there's private businesses. It could be a community business, which makes jobs, and I'll show you in another lecture how that can work. But it could be a network, for example, of small farms who come together and supply a whole food service to chefs in the city. I have an example of that in Scotland, for example. Or it could be something completely community, like delivering care for old people. So it can be private jobs, it can be NGOs, managing environment, managing heritage, and of course it can be social enterprises. And I'm going to talk after we take a break about social enterprises because I think it's a really important opportunity. So, I'll stand up in front of anybody and say this. Rural places have really important things that people want. And as every year goes by, the demand for what they have has gotten bigger. At least for the last 15 years that I've been paying attention to. Previously, they were seen a little value. I mean, who cares? In Canada, we talk about miles and miles of miles. Yeah, whatever. Cut the trees down, build a dam. Who cares? Yeah, it's ugly. Yay. Now, of course, people do care because they realize that we all live on one world, and the shit that happens up there eventually affects us. You have the big coal plant, and my house in the city gets flooded. They are connected now, aren't they? So these things are seen as little value, but now they are of high value. And again, I'll talk about that in a whole bunch of details. To be innovative, just to wrap up, use these existing things, the things you already have, in new ways. See the new value in them. Develop them to attract new markets and new customers. Combine old things in new ways. For example, food is a classic. There's a project that I'm trying to get money for across Europe, to go and talk to all the grandparents who are still living out in the rural areas. The kids are in the city, They're making money, the grandparents are out there and they're growing their food still. You know, they don't have much money and there's no credit, you know. And they know about how to grow, how to harvest and preserve, and how to cook food in a way that we don't do this in our urban lifestyle anymore. You know, frozen pizza and, you know, the big joke is, what is the Norwegian national food? Pizza Grandiosa. Because Norway has the highest level of female participation in the labor force in the world. So the women don't have time to spend all day cooking. They're 82% of them are working. Pizza Grandiosa. This old food is a resource for yuppie, eco people. It can be used to teach children, you know, primary school children about local food, the land they live on, their heritage. Old things being used in new ways. Trying to deliver authentic, real experiences, not Disney, not Mick whatever, yeah, experiences. And Mr. Slavko will talk to you a little bit about his thoughts on that, because you're in the middle of his. You know, we're not modernizing this. This is classic. This is heritage. Try to combine the values present in your landscape with things. Now, the most extreme version of that, of course, is water. When I was teaching at the University of Aberdeen, you could buy Whistler water. You know, Whistler, where the Winter Olympics were in Canada and British Columbia in 2000 and whenever that was. Scotland, it rains all the time. Why the hell would people buy water put in a bottle in Canada and shipped all the way across the ocean? But they're not just buying water, they're buying Whistler. They're buying stored snow, glaciers. Now, of course, it turns out the water comes from a tap in the suburb of Vancouver. Because it has to go through purity. It has to go through a reverse osmosis filter. So even though they say it comes from a glacier, they turn it into any kind of water anyway. So I lecture about this. I'm lecturing to my students in Norway, and I go to a conference in Seattle. And what is the first thing I see when I walk into, what's it called, Whole Foods? You know, the natural foods big retailer in America? Voss Von, Norwegian water. I couldn't believe it. But again, Voss is the place where all the Norwegian Winter Olympics champions come from. So people buy Voss water because they think, no, it's happening. Combine the values present in the landscape with products. Market existing assets using our new technologies. It's not magic, it's not rocket science, but it does take vision. It takes a community willing to do something different. It takes thinking out of the box, and it takes a lot of hard work. But hey, this is life. Life is hard work, right? Life is hard and then you die. You know, at least the hard work delivers something that you care about. It delivers an opportunity for you and your neighbors to live where you want to be, amongst each other, working together. So you can have hard work in a factory, or you can have hard work in rural community development. And the good thing about rural people is most of them tend to know how to work hard. So, thank you. What about questions? Any questions or thoughts? We don't have to. You can stop and have coffee. I'll see if there's coffee in there. But, does this make sense, what I'm saying? You think, yeah? Can you see how I'm coming from a Canadian, Scottish, Norwegian perspective? Can you see it from a Czech perspective?
Yes.
Yeah.
But still, rural areas and just been destroyed by many historical things, and I think they don't function the same way as maybe the Norwegian.
Well, now, that's interesting. Okay, you're right. Norway is a very interesting place. But let's talk about Scotland. Scotland has also been destroyed by so many things. You know the Scottish Highlands, that green, beautiful hills you see on the pictures and on the short red tins? That used to be a forest 350 years ago until English capitalists decided they could make more money by kicking the people off the land and putting sheep there. The sheep never let the trees grow again. You know, I mean, the Scots have suffered, and why was there just an independence referendum which failed in Scotland? I mean, the trick here is, you're right, to think about all those past bad things, to know it, and then to figure out your own solutions. That's, you know, and nobody can tell you better than you can tell yourself on that. You know, you and your people. It's because I mean, it is very interesting. I understand what it's like to come up against governments who don't listen. You know, and governments who are often dominated by city voters and big businesses and capital and donations to the party funds and all of those kind of things. But yeah, well, welcome to 2015. You know, I mean, yeah, it's. But you're absolutely right. I have, of course, huge sympathy, and I'm actually hoping that over the course of these 3 days, I might learn a little bit more about that as well from your particular situations. Maybe together we can brainstorm a little bit about some of those big blockages. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to take an executive decision. Coffee time. Well, this is what we need to do. Right? No, I'm just looking. What does it mean? Were you going to do something like that?
I have a presentation.
Can you do this now? Then I will start with creativity and courage. It does go to show how minds. What was it you pressed to make it go full screen? Control L.
Yeah, for
That's a new one for me. So.
yeah, for me too. But I learned it view first, and it's easy.
Yeah, but when I did that,
Yeah,
it's not the same. See, when you do that, you still get these margins.
Aha.
Že to bude dneska, jako.
Jo,
Naštěstí, že jsem se teď nahodla, že odpoledne, teda ne teďka hned.
Yeah, kids.
Dobrý, no.
Yeah, it's always good to know you're not the only one.
To je dobrý, akorát to člověk musí
For me.
jako za já si šel doufám na konkrétní věci, takže já si představuji, jak už nevyšlo.
you've had any inspiration?
Jsme jako